Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you're standing on a dusty road somewhere in Eastern Europe in the year 1241. The morning is quiet. Too quiet. The villagers whisper that something is coming from the east. At first you hear nothing. Then, faint vibrations. Not thunder. Hooves. Thousands of them. And suddenly the horizon begins to move. Not slowly. Not cautiously. But like a storm that knows exactly where it is going. Because this is not just an army. It is the Mongol army. The most efficient war machine the medieval world had ever seen. Cities that had stood for centuries fell in days. Kings who believed themselves untouchable suddenly found their armies shattered. And the strangest part? The Mongols did it with a force that was often smaller than their enemies. Tonight, we're going to step inside that machine. We'll meet the warriors who rode at its front. The archers who could strike from impossible distances. The commanders who controlled battles like chess players. And one shadowy weapon of the Mongol Empire. A secret system of spies and assassins that helped conquer the world before the battle even began. Because once you understand how the Mongol army really worked, you realize something terrifying. It wasn't chaos. It was precision. The man at the center, Genghis Khan. Every great army begins with a commander. But Genghis Khan was something different. Imagine a war council under the open sky. Generals kneel around a rough map scratched into the dirt. Instead of nobles arguing about honor and titles, Genghis Khan asks one simple question. Who can win? Not who has the richest father. Not who owns the most land. But who is the most capable? That idea alone changed warfare. In the Mongol army, promotion came from ability. A shepherd could become a general. A prince could be demoted. And that created something rare in medieval armies. Absolute loyalty. Because every soldier knew one thing. If he proved himself, he could rise. The backbone, the horse archers. Now imagine the battlefield. Across the plains rides the core of the Mongol army. The horse archers. These warriors were not just riders. They were born in the saddle. A Mongol child learned to ride before he could properly walk. By adulthood, a warrior could guide his horse using only his knees. Which meant his hands were free for something far more dangerous. His bow. The Mongol composite bow was a masterpiece. Made from wood, horn, and sinew, it was smaller than European bows but far more powerful. It could punch through armor. And a skilled archer could fire 6 arrows in less than 10 seconds. But here's the part that terrified their enemies. They didn't stop to shoot. They fired while riding at full speed. They turned in the saddle and shot behind them while retreating. A technique known as the Parthian shot. So when enemy soldiers thought the Mongols were fleeing, arrows were already flying toward them. And that leads us to one of the most famous Mongol tactics. The great trick, the feigned retreat. Picture a battlefield filled with shouting soldiers. The Mongols charge. Arrows rain down. Then suddenly, they turn and flee. The enemy cheers. They think the battle is won. And they chase. But the Mongols are not running. They are leading. Leading the enemy farther and farther from safety. Until the moment the trap closes. Hidden cavalry appear on the flanks. Fresh horse archers circle behind. And suddenly the pursuing army finds itself surrounded. What looked like a victory becomes a massacre. This tactic destroyed entire armies. And it worked again. And again. And again. The heavy cavalry, the final hammer. Horse archers created chaos. But chaos alone does not end battles. For that, the Mongols had something else. Heavy cavalry. These warriors rode larger horses and wore armor made from iron plates or hardened leather. Their horses were sometimes armored as well. They carried lances, curved sabers, heavy maces. While archers weakened and disorganized the enemy, the heavy cavalry waited. Then, when the enemy formation finally broke, they charged. Not in scattered attacks, but in disciplined waves. The impact was devastating. Once the heavy cavalry struck, most battles ended within minutes. The 10 system, the army as a living machine. But the true genius of the Mongol army wasn't just weapons. It was organization. Every soldier belonged to a precise unit structure. 10 soldiers formed an arban. 10 arbans formed a zun, 100 soldiers. 10 zuns formed a mingan, 1,000 soldiers. And 10 minghans formed a tuman, an army of 10,000 warriors. This system meant orders could travel instantly. One command passed through the ranks like electricity. And discipline was absolute. If one soldier fled, his entire unit could be punished. Which meant every warrior protected the others. Fear of failure kept the machine tight. The Mongol siege masters. Most people imagine Mongols only fighting on open plains. But when they reached great cities, they adapted. And quickly. They recruited Chinese engineers and Persian siege specialists. Soon Mongol armies carried catapults, massive trebuchets, siege towers, early gunpowder weapons. During the siege of cities like Baghdad or Xiangyang, Mongol artillery bombarded walls day and night. Stones weighing hundreds of pounds smashed towers and gates. Defenders quickly learned something frightening. No wall was safe forever. The fastest army in history. Another secret of Mongol power was speed. Every warrior traveled with 3 to 5 horses. When one horse became tired, he switched. That meant Mongol armies could travel 80 to 100 miles in a single day. For comparison, most medieval armies moved only 15 miles. This speed allowed Mongols to appear where no one expected them. Cities sometimes learned they were under attack only when Mongol scouts were already at the gates. The secret weapon, the Yam network. Now here's something few people know. The Mongols built one of the greatest communication networks in history. It was called the Yam system. Across the empire stood relay stations every 25 to 30 miles. At each station, fresh horses, fresh riders, fresh supplies. A message could cross thousands of miles in days. Faster than any other empire of the time. This allowed Mongol commanders to coordinate armies separated by entire continents. It was like the medieval version of a military internet. But the Yam had another purpose. Spies, merchants, messengers. They moved through this network constantly. Gathering intelligence, learning weaknesses, and sometimes bribing city officials before the Mongol army even arrived. In many cases, cities surrendered before the battle even began. The shadows before the storm. Before a Mongol invasion, strange travelers often appeared. Traders, diplomats, messengers. But many of them were not what they seemed. They counted soldiers, measured walls, studied the politics of the city. Sometimes they even helped spread rumors. Fear traveled ahead of the Mongol army. Stories of destroyed cities, massive cavalry swarms, entire kingdoms collapsing. By the time the real army arrived, many enemies were already terrified. And fear can win half a battle. What made the Mongol army so powerful? So what made this army unstoppable? It wasn't just the horses, or the bows, or even Genghis Khan. It was the system. Horse archers who moved like wind. Heavy cavalry that struck like thunder. Commanders promoted by skill. siege engineers who shattered cities, spies who prepared the battlefield long before the fighting began, and a communication network that allowed the entire empire to move as one. The Mongol army wasn't just an army. It was a machine of motion. A storm that could appear anywhere. And when people across Asia and Europe saw dust rising on the horizon, they knew something. The storm had arrived.